team of experts have been deployed to monitor disaster relief funds in provinces lashed by the recent heavy downpours. President Cyril Ramaphosa also announcing last week that real-time audits will be conducted to keep a lid on corruption. For more on that, we're joined by the Auditor General of South Africa, Tsakani Maluleke. Good evening, Ms. Maluleke. Thanks for your time. Firstly, let's just begin with more broadly this idea of real-time audits and how that's going to be conducted by your office.
Good evening, Kathy, and thank you for having me on your show. Good evening to the viewers at home as well. So, Kathy, real-time audits are still within the realm of our role as the independent auditor of how public funds are spent. What's different about these audits is that we do them, we call it in real time, in that instead of waiting for a full year to go by and then we audit and come back with findings, we give quick insight on, first of all, the risks that might come to pass if they are not mitigated appropriately by those that run public institutions, so that they can prevent things going wrong. That's the first part. Then the second part is for us to actually conduct the detective work. And we do that as soon as transactions have happened, and that's rather than waiting for a full year to go by. And we do that and issue findings and recommendations, which accounting officers can then act on pretty swiftly so that problems are mitigated in a very short space of time. And the other thing that's very different about real-time audits is that we conduct them by deploying multidisciplinary teams from our office. That would comprise call it the regularity or financial auditors who work in concert with other experts, forensics experts, experts in information systems, experts in other areas of work such as engineers, quantity surveyors and the like, so that the work we can issue is one that provides credible, useful insights and information that accounting officers can act on. The other, I think, really exciting part about real-time audits, which we did in the context of the COVID-19 expenditures as well, is that we can then collaborate with not only those that oversee the accounting officers right up to the legislature or parliament and make sure they have information quickly and can effect oversight and consequence management on their part. But we can also collaborate with other public bodies. An example would be in the context of the COVID-19 expenditure real-time audits, where we worked with the Fusion Center. We could hand our information over to them, and they can then play their part as their mandate to do.
Given some of the concerns that you've highlighted, whether it's at a local, provincial or national government, but some of the weaknesses in our accounting systems, what are the red flag issues that you would go into this process being mindful of and specifically looking out for, given the fact that you understand that pattern?
Yeah, as you rightly so, we understand the pattern. We see every single one of the public entities at least once a year. And each year when we do our analysis of what tends to go wrong, procurement management is a key feature. Supply chain management is a key feature. The ability to integrate the different databases of government institutions in a way that helps them drive initiatives that cut across different institutions. Those things we find are particularly in need of attention. So we will continue to look at that. First of all, we're flagging it for accounting officers now to say attend to these things so that they do not trick you in your quest to do this really good work around the relief for flood victims, as well as when you go into the reconstruction phase, the recovery and ultimately the reconstruction phase. So make sure when you procure, you do so within the law. And even in an emergency, one's required to make decisions quickly. And sometimes there's a trade-off between applying the full ambit of supply chain management or procurement laws vis-a-vis getting what you need on the ground quickly. And what that requires is for accounting officers to make those trade-offs fully aware that what they must never compromise is the notion of good governance, of accountability and transparency. So where there are deviations, they need to make sure that they document them and that they get the right sort of approvals And they can always defend the actions they've taken and demonstrate how they've mitigated the risks that might manifest if they don't go for the full ambit, let's say, of procurement policies that they have. So what we're finding is, as I say, supply chain management / procurement, and that would also incorporate the ability to manage the quality of goods and services that are rendered by the appointed service providers. And then on the other hand, we would also want to look at how the key initiatives of availing relief funds or even, let's say, food parcels and the like, those are implemented in a way that reaches the intended beneficiaries rather than not.
You've mentioned that the COVID-19 funds were also monitored through real-time audits. That didn't stop people from going ahead and abusing the system and, in some instances, looting public coffers. And when you see that as the Auditor General, what does that say to you? And how do you ensure that even in future, that just the mention of the fact that our office is going to be involved would deter people from wanting to loot the country's resources?
I think it's quite clear that we have yet to get to a point that those that are appointed to act as stewards of public funds behave in a manner that's consistent with that moral obligation to society. What we've learned out of let's say, the PPE expenditures in particular, was that there was value in us conducting our work in real time, reporting on it quickly so that consequences could apply. That's why, Kathy, first of all, there was transparency to the issues. In a very short space of time, all of South Africa was well aware of what had happened, which is not always the second thing that could happen was that there were accountability processes that then kicked into motion. We handed some of our work to the SIU, who then did the detailed investigations, and the law enforcement processes are now underway, which is not something we've seen before, in that things can be picked up and dealt with quickly. That's a lesson in terms of how we can even strengthen the collaboration between ourselves as well as investigative bodies and those that have law enforcement mandates in the public sector, so that all of these actions can actually happen quickly. I'll give you another thing that we learned out of the real-time audits on COVID. We audited within the first 3 months the way in which the UIF benefit and the SASSA benefit was being managed. We gave findings, and those that run those institutions were very quick about implementing our recommendations, such that when we went back after 3 months again, we found fewer exceptions. We found fewer instances of people getting the benefit when they should. Fewer instances of people being denied the benefit unjustly. And we also found in a very short space of time that those that had tried to default either one of those schemes were now being put into the dock. You might recall that by the time the 2020 ended, the calendar year ended, there were many reports of a number of people who were now being put into the dock. And then, of course, there were recoveries. Some of the funds that had been paid unjustly or unfairly were then put back into the coffers of both entities, which allows those funds to now be used to advance the benefit to deserving beneficiaries.
Of course, you stepped into this role at the time where the Office of the Auditor General was generally given more powers when it comes to pursuing accountability where there has been instances of wrongdoing. What have you found to be what has been your experience rather in as far as exercising those powers are concerned, whether it's referring it to the relevant authorities to investigate, trying to directly recoup some of those monies?
We've had some success with the referrals, as you've spoken about, and I've given a couple of examples where the work that we did, because we could do it quickly and we were now starting to implement more effective collaborative partnerships with the different bodies, the consequence management could now happen. The other thing which we found and continue to find is that accounting officers actually respond to the MI process, which is the one where we not just give an audit finding, but now we say this one is a material irregularity in that it needs your urgent action as an accounting officer, because it is having a detrimental impact on South Africans, on the institution you run, on a particular part of infrastructure that you're responsible for. So you've got to act. And what we're finding, Kathy, is beyond what tended to be the norm, where our audit reports would get shelved and accounting officers would almost forget about it until we come back the following year. This time around, our material irregularities are getting the attention and responsiveness that they deserve. What we are hoping is that what accounting officers will start to do is act not only on the identified material irregularities, but on audit findings as well, and implement solutions that are really informed by a posture that's about institution building, building strength in internal controls, so that you do not end up with a reoccurrence of similar findings in the future.
Drawing on your lessons again on the COVID-19 real-time audits, what was the biggest challenge that the office faced that you could likely be anticipating this time around as well?
One of the things we had to scramble with was that this was the first time we were dealing with something like this. Whilst we had knowledge of how the different government entities operate, what we were not clear about was how we would approach the work. So we learned a few things around how to organize ourselves, but also even how to shape the type of recommendations that lead to accounting officers understanding what it is they need to act on. And that's a strength which we're going to lean on now, because the muscle that we built much more decisively following those expenditures. So what I think you can expect out of this work is that you'll see quicker reports, you'll see much more actionable recommendations issued to accounting officers who, if they respond and act, will actually ensure that funds are safeguarded and that the funds that are deployed indeed reach the beneficiaries as intended.
All right, let's leave it there for tonight. Auditor General of South Africa, Tsakani Maluleke.